Good day to everyone in the audience. My name is Jeff Schlanger. I am the consent decree monitor for the City of Aurora. With me today are three members of the Community Advisory Council, the CAC, the co-chairs of that council, and I'd like to introduce them now. Reed?
So my name is Reed Heddick, and I am a pastor of Mosaic Church of Aurora and the chair of Aurora's Key Community Response Team.
And my name is Jeanette Rodriguez, and I'm also a pastor in the community, and I also serve in different committees in the city.
Omar Montgomery, I am not a pastor, president of the Aurora branch of the NAACP.
Thank you, and I thank the three co-chairs for being here today. We're here today to talk a little bit about the first 3 months of the consent decree monitorship. Our report will, by the time you see this, have been produced and been available online. But we did want to give an overview of that report and talk about our activities during the monitorship. So just a little bit by way of background of the monitorship. It came about through a spotlight that was put on Aurora Public Safety by the tragic death of Elijah McClain and a subsequent investigation by the Attorney General of the state of Colorado. The Attorney General issued an investigative report which ultimately led to litigation with the city, which was immediately settled by the entry of a consent decree in which the city and the Attorney General agreed that the city would undertake various reforms in regard to public safety in the city of Aurora. It contains a variety of different mandates that deal with the systems that were found to be deficient by the Attorney General, and the goal of those mandates is really to reform those systems to make sure that public safety in Aurora is fair, just, transparent. And through that process, increase public trust, better fight crime, and enhance officer safety and wellness. Our report, which was just published, is the first of 12 scheduled reports. We are meant to report 4 times in the first year and then twice in each of the subsequent years that we are here during the 5-year term of the consent decree. This is a little graphic that I use to describe the process that we believe is important to understand and to emulate in terms of what we want to achieve for the city of Aurora. It starts with the strong foundation of the chief directives, or what we call the chief directives, which deal with courage, with humanity, with integrity, with empathy for all. And what those simply are foundational principles that we believe every police officer in Aurora should be abiding by. And on that strong foundation stand the pillars of the operations of any police department. They start with recruiting, hiring, and promotion, with strong policies and procedures, with adequate training, with operational integrity, and with accountability. And they support the mission of the department. And that is really to create a public safety system which fosters a safe and equitable environment for the community and its officers through policing that is fair, just, transparent, and accountable. When we have those items working together, we increase public trust, we enhance public safety, and we enhance officer wellness and officer safety. A little bit about what the Independent Consent Decree Monitor is all about. Our job, we talked about the reforms that are laid out in the consent decree. Our job is to make sure that the reforms which the city has promised to undertake are in fact undertaken and are in fact completed. Essentially, what we provide is integrity assurance to the process, making sure that what should get done by agreement of the parties is in fact getting done. This is done through a process that we have tested with time in other jurisdictions. We have developed what is called the methodologies to aid in the determination of compliance, the MADCs. We did that through collaboration with the city and all of its stakeholders. And through that process, we fulfill one of the missions of the consent decree monitor, and that is the assessment of each of these mandates that the city has. The other aspect of what we need to do is to provide technical assistance to the city, and we do that when the city asks us to do that in each of the various areas which we will go into in a moment. Another aspect of what the monitor is doing is interacting with the community. And we are doing that through a number of different ways. We have established a website, auroramonitor.org, which we urge everyone to visit. We have done that through a town hall, and we will be holding town halls in the future. And most importantly, we have done that through the establishment of the Community Advisory Council, the co-chairs of which are sitting with me here today. The monitor, myself, has brought a team approach to monitoring. This is our team. Each member of our team has a different area of expertise, and we bring those areas of expertise to bear on both the assessment and the technical assistance that we are providing. This is the Community Advisory Council. In addition to the co-chairs who are sitting with me here today, there are 9 members who were selected by the co-chairs and who will be participating with the monitor and with the community going forward. And it is my hope that the Community Advisory Council, in fact, long outlives both the consent decree and the monitorship. Just a couple of highlights from the first reporting period. We were awarded the contract on February 14th of this year. The first reporting period covers the first 3 months of our tenure here, that is from February 14th through May 15th. And the report that's coming out is covering that period. We had a month to produce the report. We shared it with the parties to vet it for any errors that there might be factually in the report, and it will be published on the 13th of this month. During this period, we had significant engagement with stakeholders in the process, from city participants, including APD, AFR, the City Attorney's Office, the City Manager's Office, and the Civil Service Commission. We also met extensively with the Attorney General's Office. We have included in this monitorship, and this is very unique for monitorships, we have included the unions, the Police and Firefighters Union, in this process. We have met with the Public Defender's Office, with the Sheriff's, Public Safety Committee of the City Council, and extensively with community members. We have established a once-a-month meeting with all of these stakeholders and parties. As I mentioned, we have established the Community Advisory Council. We have established a self-assessment process in which the relevant city agency self-assesses how it is doing with respect to a particular mandate. We had our first town hall meeting. We have conducted a community survey, which is published in our report. We have published those methodologies to aid in the determination of compliance, and we have, in fact, published our first report. The first reporting period, just an overview of the assessment. We examined 36 of 70 mandates under the MADCs. 9 were in substantial compliance, 8 of which dealt with the use of ketamine and chemical sedatives, 1 of which dealt with the Civil Service Commission hiring an expert. Of the remaining 29, 9 are on a cautionary track, and that means that on the report card they show up in a yellow or orange icon. And that means that we have a concern with respect to that track, and that is dealing mostly with issues of governance over the development of policies and procedures and training relative to the APD. We are working diligently with them to resolve those issues and feel confident that they will be resolved in the near future. In addition to those items, there were 20 items that remain that were in various stages on track with our expectation moving towards substantial compliance. And then there were 3 focus issues. The first focus issue dealt with the termination of Chief Wilson. First of all, we want to thank her for her service. She spearheaded extreme cooperation with the Monitor and the Monitor team. We thank her for that. But we have been involved in monitorships where chiefs, frankly, come and go. And that is the natural progression of the reality of the situation with chiefs in American policing today. But the Monitor is here to stay for my term. I will be here for the 5 years, and we will work with whomever is in that particular seat to make sure that the mandates of the consent decree are carried out. We had a terrific relationship with Chief Jewell and continue to have that relationship, but while he was serving as interim chief, and that continues with Chief Oates as well. But while Chief Wilson was in that seat, there were a number of significant efforts that were undertaken before we even arrived on the scene. They included the new way, the establishment of the Community Relations Section, the Community Police Task Force, and the Chief's Youth Advisory Team. And just when we got here, there was Aurora Youth Night, which was a fantastic success by all accounts. In a second focus issue, we look at systems that are designed to best ensure best policing practices. And those include enhanced first-line supervision, early intervention systems, internal affairs and civilian complaint investigation processes, the disciplinary system, data analysis, performance evaluation, customer service feedback, audit and inspection, and post-incident review. And we took an incident that occurred back on May 15th, 2021, to use as an example of first what can go wrong when the systems don't get it exactly right, but more importantly, what can happen under those same circumstances when the systems correct themselves and ultimately do put an officer on the correct path. So we are very, very happy that the officer who was involved in that May 15th incident has had the additional training and the additional mentoring that was necessary in order to put them back on the right path. Areas of the consent decree, there are multiple areas that we examined, the first of which is policies and training generally. And these policies and training, the general aspect of them is that both APD and AFR must work continuously to ensure that the policies are consistent with one another and that there's an appropriate system for violation of those policies. There were 3 mandates in this area that we reviewed during this reporting period. I talked a little bit about the lack of governance and how we're working on that with APD. We expect that that will be addressed not only through our work, but also through the work of the CJI, which has been engaged to help in this process as well. The next area that we looked at was addressing racial bias in policing. And here the Attorney General, in its investigation, found that there was a pattern and practice of race-based policing. The consent decree, again, with the city agreeing to certain reforms in this area, calls out certain standards and expectations that are required in this area, better tracking for outcomes, and improved training. We assessed 11 mandates in this area. We found that each of those mandates were being moved forward in line with our expectations. We've worked extensively with APD on finalizing what will be a data collection form for all contacts that the APD has. And this will ensure that constitutional policing is really the way that policing is conducted in Aurora. It's constitutional policing that will also, at the same time, through best practices, make sure that we are fighting crime appropriately here in Aurora. We also dealt extensively with data collection in this area, and we have experts on our team, specifically Robin Engel, who, through her team at the University of Cincinnati, will be helping out in the area of the interpretation of the data which is collected in this area. The next area that we looked at was the use of force, and the AG found in this particular area that there was, again, a pattern of practice of using force excessively, and that also this extended to use of force which might be legal but not necessary, and was disproportionate, and was disproportionate not only in terms of the general population, but specifically with respect to people of color and with respect to people with mental disabilities or in mental health crisis. We assessed 17 mandates in this area, most of which were progressing in line with expectations, but there was some uncertainty with respect to the Force Review Board. And again, in this area, we are working closely with APD to make sure that the Force Review Board, which reviews level 2 and level 3 uses of force, is being as critical as is necessary in order to ensure that there are appropriate remediations, non-disciplinary remediations for the most part, to correct behavior of officers who can be doing it better out there. We focused on policies and protocols of that Force Review Board, and we'll be dealing with that much more in this current reporting period too. The next area of the consent decree that we were dealing with was the documentation of stops. Here there was a finding by the Attorney General, again, of a pattern and practice of not collecting the data which was required under state law, and a lack of proper guidance being given to officers on the street in order to conduct what is known as a Terry stop, which requires that there be a reasonable, articulable suspicion in order to make that stop. We are working extensively with the department in this area, and I want to point out at this point of the presentation that the vast majority of the men and women who make up the public safety services of Aurora only want to do the right thing. And when they stray, it is most often because of inadequate policies, inadequate training, inadequate supervision, inadequate accountability. Those 5 pillars, if you will, of policing. In addition to our work on the data collection portion of stops and the policies relative to Terry stops, we are working on policies relative to stop and frisk, and when searches, both consensual and non-consensual, are permissible, when it's permissible to engage in conversation, and what those conversations with citizens need to look like under the Constitution of both the state of Colorado and the United States. So more to come, much more to come next reporting period in this area. We also looked at the use of sedatives as chemical restraints, and this was a real bright spot in terms of how the department was doing, in this case AFR. We looked at 9 of these areas, and in all 9 of those mandates, there was substantial progress. 8 of them were in substantial compliance. We will continue those assessments going forward, but this looks real good. I think, as most folks know, AFR has discontinued entirely the use of ketamine, but there still are other chemical restraints which are being used on occasion, and we as a monitoring team are looking at each one of those incidents to make sure that they comport with the mandates of the consent decree. We are, in the area of recruitment, hiring, and promotion, working closely with the stakeholders in this process, including APD, AFR, the city, human resources in the city, and of course the Civil Service Commission. We have done a deep dive on the hiring practices, and our goal is to make sure that, number one, the men and women of both departments reflect the composition of the city of Aurora in terms of diversity, but at the same time that they are the best folks that we can get for the jobs that they are performing. So that is our task. That is what we're working toward. And we are working toward making sure that both APD and AFR have the appropriate input into the process through the hiring steps that are gone through. The last area that we looked at, or I should say the last area of the consent decree, is the area of accountability and transparency, and that is somewhat of an overlay over all of these other areas. We haven't yet gotten into the systems of discipline, but we have talked extensively, and we talk extensively in our report about those systems of accountability and how important those are, although we haven't yet looked at the specific mandates or measured compliance with respect to the specific mandates of this area of the consent decree. So that is really what we've undertaken. What I'd like to show you now is just the report card and the rubric that we use for scoring. These are Harvey balls, as they are called, and we use a red, yellow, and green. Green is all is good, yellow cautionary, red there is trouble and we need to solve, and then the degree of completion of the ball itself is an indication of how far the department in question is toward achieving substantial compliance. So that's an overview of where we are, what we've done in this first reporting period. I told you about the importance of the community, and what I'd like to do now is turn it over to our co-chairs of the Community Advisory Council, and that council will be the monitor's eyes and ears on the ground to make sure that all of these promises that the city has made, all of these mandates that they have undertaken to complete are in fact being seen and felt on the streets of Aurora. So with that, let me turn it over to the co-chairs of the CAC and Reed.
Thank you, first of all, Jeff, for all of your work. Your team and your just sort of the scope of work is great, is incredible, and I've been really impressed with the skill set that you and your team brings. The Attorney General's work is commendable with the consent decree, and the detail and the scope of training as well as policy improvement and all those things are really good. My question for you is, where's the teeth in this whole agreement? Because even your term, substantial compliance, doesn't make me feel like that's finished work. So what happens if the city, if APD, AFR, are not in compliance at the end of all this?
Yeah. Let me say first, Reed, that our hope is that we leave processes in place after we're done, that while the report card may show all green balls fully colored up, that there will be processes in place and individuals in place, both in the department and outside of the department, but within the city, that will take on the role of the monitor to make sure that it remains on the right path. With respect to teeth, there are certain teeth that are built into the consent decree itself, and that is that we won't leave until there is substantial compliance. So while the term is meant to be 5 years and could be shorter if there is substantial compliance before that period of time, if there's not substantial compliance at 5 years, then we stay. The other teeth that are out there, but hopefully we'll never have to resort to, is going back to the Attorney General. This is a result of litigation. Mm-hmm. There is a judge who is supervising this, who has the power to issue orders to the city of one sort or another to make certain that the mandates of the decree are in fact carried out.
Thank you for that explanation. And I know that in some of our earlier meetings, the city even asked us as a community to hold their feet to the fire. And I think you can be assured that we will be happy to take on that responsibility as well.
And we appreciate that.
Good. Omar?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to piggyback on everything that you just said in regards to just the work that's been done in this first report. I'm enjoying the analysis and learning more about Aurora PD in general. I want to thank Attorney General Phil Weiser and the City of Aurora for coming to the agreement to have the consent decree. With that stated, you talked about some cases that you were analyzing, and I think about the case of the little girls that were on the hot asphalt, and I think about the Elijah McClain case, and what keeps coming up is training and the curriculum within the training. What role will your organization play in regards to training future APD officers, current APD officers, or with the curriculum to change the culture within the organization?
Thanks for that question. And training, as you point out, is all important. Training obviously has to be built on policies which are best practice policies, so we need to make sure first that those are in place. As I mentioned briefly during my talk, we have two roles here. One is to assess, right? And we will be doing that with respect to the training. The other is to provide technical assistance through the team that we have brought to Aurora. And that technical assistance is in place to provide the city with the knowledge that we bring, with the experience that we have through working with tens of other departments around the country to ensure that not only is policy best practice, but of course that training is based on best practice and is being delivered in a best practice methodology through scenarios that are presented to officers so they can experience and feel this rather than just didactic learning. So the monitor plays an all-important role in training. We are supposed to vet any training in the areas that touch upon the consent decree before it is delivered, and we will take that responsibility seriously as the department moves toward developing crime-fighting strategies. We will be there to make sure that those strategies, when implemented, are implemented based on a proper selection of officers to provide special functions for crime fighting, that the training is there to make sure that they are properly trained in the areas of constitutional policing, making sure that there is not racial profiling, making certain that stops are conducted in accordance with the Constitution, making sure that frisks are only engaged in when there is a true and reasonable fear for one's own safety or the safety of others in these engagements. So we will be looking at all of that. And we have a great tool that wasn't here when I started in this business. I won't even tell you how long ago it was, but it wasn't there then, and that is the tool of the body-worn camera. So we will be looking carefully at body-worn camera video to make certain that, in fact, crime fighting and constitutional policing are working hand in glove on the streets. And it's there where we are going to rely on the Community Advisory Council to be our ear to the ground, so to speak, to make sure that the reforms that we just talked about aren't just on paper, but are actually being felt by the men and women, the residents, those who come to work and visit in Aurora, that they're being felt on the streets of Aurora as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And again, my question would be, how does the community get involved in this process?
So again, thank you for that question. And the consent decree itself recognizes how important the community is to this process. It didn't specify that we create a community advisory council, but in prior monitorships in which I have been engaged, it worked out very, very well. And so that's one way. So the community is engaged by the three of you sitting here and the other 9 members who will sit in monthly meetings with us. The community will be engaged through our website, which, by the way, is translatable into, I think, 100 languages or so. The community will be engaged through our town hall meetings, the next one of which will be on August 9th, and we urge everyone to make it out and hear a little bit more about the consent decree and hear questions from the community itself. And we hope that people will reach out to the members of the CAC who aren't serving on that important committee, but who can lend input, raise issues, concerns that they have, that they believe that APD or AFR need to address, and we will do our darndest to make sure that they get addressed.
Thank you for that.
Great. So I think it is important that we let people know about this next town hall meeting.
Yes.
So it is our plan. Our town hall meeting will be on Tuesday evening, August 9th. And we don't have the exact location for that yet, but you're going to be getting a lot of information about that meeting. And that meeting will be really a key way for everybody in the community to be involved. It won't be just for us members and a few of us, but it'll be an opportunity for anybody to ask questions and examine some documents and be a part of the process any way they want to. And this will just be the first, well, it's actually the second of many meetings that we'll have over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. And we really encourage you to engage with that. So be looking for that information for the next town hall meeting on, and I believe it's at 6:30 on August 9th at a place to be determined very soon. So come and join us for that, please.
So with that, what I'd like to do is thank everybody for watching. Again, thank the city for making these production facilities available to us. Thank the city for the extreme cooperation that we have gotten throughout this process. Thank the community for its involvement. Thank my co-chairs here, but also thank the men and women of the Aurora Police Department and Aurora Fire Rescue for that which they do every day, for putting their lives on the line for each of us to make sure that we can enjoy the community as we do. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at that town hall.